All right. Well, here we are again this week talking about the legislative session down at the state capitol. So this is the sixth week of the General Assembly meeting during their 120-day session, which started back in January and will go till May 8th. We have this is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com. We have a special guest co-host here, Hannah Goodman, the chairwoman of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Hannah, how are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And we do have our elected Libertarian mayor, Mayor Aaron Lamb of Keensburg. How are you, Aaron?
Good evening, Brandon. Doing great. Really excited to talk about everything coming up this week.
Wonderful. Well, there's a lot of horrible, horrible bills to get excited about. Hopefully, people can use this information to be empowered to reach out to your elected representative who's supposed to be representing your community. Tell them about how bad this legislation is, why they should oppose it, or maybe why they should vote for it if it's a good bill, a good pro liberty bill, which we have at least one of to talk about this week. But it also, we want to help make it easier for you to get down to the state capitol and testify. So you can always go to freestatecolorado.com/testify to get some more information, kind of put together this guide on making it as easy as possible to testify down at the state capitol, kind of a step-by-step process there. But we'll go ahead and get started here and take a look at what we got going on this week. All right, so we'll start off talking about the bills from last week, kind of giving you an update. So these were the key bills that we highlighted this previous week. So Monday, there was a tax exemption, a sales tax exemption for children's products passed. Probably a good pro-liberty bill on some level because it does reduce the tax burden on Coloradans, but does also create this special little carve out for a certain class of products, which is kind of distorting the market. Local Government Taxpayers Bill of Rights, House Bill 1026. That was an awesome bill that would have empowered citizens and taxpayers to have to give consent on taking away their taxpayer Bill of Rights protections. Of course, it was killed. No surprise there. Senate Bill 3, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI authority to investigate firearms crimes. Really terrible bill. Did pass. That one is giving a lot of money to the state government to go after gun shops, licensed gun dealers to try and enforce these unconstitutional magazine bans and other such pieces of legislation, anti-gun bills. So bad bill did pass, not surprising there. On Tuesday of last week, the civil forfeiture reform bill was killed. Unfortunately, House Bill 1023 was a good one. Hannah, I really liked what you had to say about some of the Republicans who were responsible for killing that bill. What's your message to these Republicans who really, Republicans don't have a lot of control in the state legislature. They could have passed civil forfeiture reform. It was three Republican votes that killed this bill.
Three Republican votes killed a Republican bill that had Democratic support and was also supported by our friends at RMGO. So, my message definitely for those legislators, I would like them to know that they're on notice. We are coming for those districts as libertarians. I have a nice swing vote here in this state. I'm powerful when it comes to being a spoiler. So continue to challenge liberty and just know that your seat is going to be heavily challenged here in Colorado in 2024. So that's what I can promise those legislators. It was incredibly weak to kill such a wonderful bill that would have really helped liberty here in Colorado. So I was really disappointed to see Matt Sopers, Gabe Evans, and Armstrong kill that bill in committee. And the thing is, they're funded by, you know, police unions and things like, well, not unions, but the PACs and things that support those types of things. And they didn't want to lose that support for running their campaigns. So, once again, with shekels come the shackles, and the Libertarian Party is here to challenge you this next election cycle. We're coming.
Yeah, really disappointing votes from some what should be key Liberty Republicans. So definitely Libertarian Party keeping them on watch. Awesome. Senate Bill 20 did pass last week. That would basically allow permanent rules that were adopted during COVID as temporary measures to allow alcohol beverage delivery and takeout. A good pro-liberty bill did pass committee. A really bad bill to create a new licensing and regulatory scheme around towing carriers. People who tow cars parked illegally or violating somebody's private property. Unfortunately, did pass, was amended, but definitely a bad bill. Would really make it harder for private property owners as well to get cars towed off their property. House Bill 241075, analysis of universal healthcare payment system. This is one of those bills where they're trying to basically make it easier to usher in a healthcare system, a universal healthcare system run by the state government. So that bill did pass. They're just on initial stages of that, but nonetheless a bad bill. Last week we talked about Thursday bills, House Bill 1029 to prohibit foreign ownership. That one was rescheduled, was not heard yet. Kind of an interesting bill there. Interesting on the pro-liberty or not consideration. We can talk about that when it gets back up for committee hearing. Really bad bill, Senate Bill 22, regulate flavored tobacco products, giving counties the ability to ban types of tobacco products that they don't like. Really bad bill, did pass. Compensation for state elected officials, where they're trying to figure out ways to make more money off taxpayers, did get rescheduled. The social work licensure compact passed, allowing social workers in different states to be able to work without having to go through new additional barriers. Really horrific bill. What I thought was probably one of the worst bills of the week last week, Senate Bill 66, creating a merchant category code for every firearms and ammunition purchase in the state. That did pass committee. Really, really bad bill. Hopefully, it doesn't make it all the way through the legislature. We'll keep an eye on that. And a good bill that was killed as well, safety clause use review. The safety clause is what legislators use at the end of every bill to make it go into effect a lot sooner than it would otherwise. It's something that's been abused. So this was a way to rein that in. Unfortunately, was killed. Not surprised at all. So that's what we talked about last week, some of the key bills and their current status in the legislature. Anything, Mayor Lamb or Hannah, would you like to add on any of these bills before we move on to this week?
The universal healthcare payment system makes me want to die. That sounds like a really bad bill. The healthcare system is already completely screwed up. It's going to be worse. That's awful.
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, again, we've been tracking these anti-gun bills, and as we talked about at length last week, creating that code which will allow them to track, have a backdoor registration process, at least a registry, I should say, not a registration process, so that when and if they do get some more assault weapons ban type of bill through, that they already know where all the gun owners are, and along with the new CBI authority to investigate on this SB 24-003. Those go hand in hand. And right now it's intended to be used against these gun shops that are still selling magazines that are of standard capacity. But we know that it's just going to expand and become Colorado's own ATF, which I do not look forward to the amount of dogs that they will kill.
Absolutely terrible bills. Anything to empower the state government's law enforcement capability should be the opposite of what Democrats are trying to push, right? They're all about defund the police and criminal justice reform. Unfortunately, if you're a gun owner, they do want to fund the police even more and go after you and lock you up. Of course, this is going to disproportionately affect people that Democrats claim to care about, like the poor and minority communities. If they're going to be the first targets by law enforcement, of course, for violating any type of firearms laws. Sad
And
stuff there.
then when they come raid your house or whatever, they're going to take your property and they're going to hold on to it and they're going to sell it. And that's due to the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Bill being killed. So that goes hand in hand for sure.
Very good point.
Definitely. Definitely. So we'll go ahead and move on. That was last week. We're going to look at some of the different bills this week.
Okay.
Bennett, we have a special guest here, Bennett Rutledge, as well, joined us. Bennett, I'll give you a few seconds if you wanted to say something here.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the Senate conference resolution 001, which is actually calling for an amendment to the Colorado's own Bill of Rights.
Oh, interesting. Hadn't heard of that one, Bennett. If you want to share it to me here in the Zoom chat, we'll go ahead and address it later in our talk here. So awesome. I'm going to go ahead and mute you, and
Okay.
we're going to move on to bills of the week here. All right. So looking at bills of the week, we're going to deep dive a little bit into this as we go through the calendar and look at each bill individually. But this kind of gives you a generic idea of what we're going to be talking about this week, some of what's coming up, some bills we've been tracking since the session began, and others that have just popped up recently. So it's Monday through Wednesday. And then Thursday, always a big committee hearing down at the Capitol. So if you don't know, the state legislature meets basically Monday through Friday for business. They have their committee hearings sprinkled kind of throughout the day. In general, they're after the House and the Senate meet as a committee as the whole. So the way we're going to find this information, the way you as an individual out there who wants to have a voice in government can find this information is to go to the Colorado General Assembly website, leg.colorado.gov. This is really your hub, a great resource for all the legislation going through the state capitol. You can look up who your legislator is there, and you can also track ballot measures on that same website. So when you click into leg.colorado.gov, this is what it looks like. Giving you some information, we're going to go ahead and click on session schedule, full schedule to see everything that's being heard this week. Perfect. So today, Sunday, no bills being heard, no surprise there. We'll go ahead and click into Monday and start going through the calendar. So tomorrow, Monday, 10 a.m., the House and the Senate will both convene. We won't talk about the bills they're going through. There's not really a lot of opportunity for citizen input. I mean, you can, get on social media and really hype up some of those bills that are being talked about. But generally, it's the committee hearings where you have the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes, look these legislators in the eye, and have your voice heard and your testimony entered into public record. So looking at the House Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee, a couple interesting bills there, nothing too exciting, nothing I really wanted to get into. House Bill 1033, Emergency Management Plan Individuals with Animals. So that's just kind of, for emergency management plans that are out there for the government, kind of making sure that people who have animals with them are taken into consideration. And then management of certain public safety emergencies, kind of changing how the county and the governments and local jurisdictions work together. Nothing too exciting there. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next committee. So Monday, 1:30, House Finance will be heard. And of course, Mayor Lamb and Chairwoman Hannah, if you have any input, feel free to interrupt me. House Finance at 1:30 tomorrow on Monday. We got our first really good bill of the week, one of our more important bills of the week. So at 1:30 p.m. in House Committee Room 112, every Coloradan has the opportunity to show up and speak, even provide testimony by Zoom as well, or written testimony, which usually doesn't get read. So this is House Bill 1065, Reduction of State Income Tax Rate. A good bill that actually, believe it or not, Governor Polis has called for in terms of lowering our state income tax. Now, this bill would start January 1st, 2025, reducing both the individual and the corporate state income tax rates from 4.4% to 4%. So there we go. The bill also exempts the rate reductions from the existing statutory requirements. That tax expenditure legislation include a tax preference performance statement in the statutory legislative declaration or appeal after a specified period of years. So we got Rose Puglisi, the new House Minority Leader, sponsoring this bill. Scott Bottoms, who's a really good pro-liberty legislator, probably the best we have there. Senator Kirkmeyer, who's on and off, sometimes passes some really bad or introduces some bad legislation, but in this case, she's doing a good one here. I always tell people to get really more information on the bill, click into where the fiscal note is. If there's a fiscal change to our state budget, you can click into view recent fiscal note and find out a lot more clear information where the Legislative Council staff provides kind of a distilled version, a more layman's version of the information. You don't have to read all the bill language. So one of the big things to look at here, this bill will actually reduce revenue for the state government from 24 to 25 by 600 million. And then 2025 to 2026, you're talking $1.3 billion in lost state revenue. So from a libertarian perspective, from a pro-liberty, pro-freedom perspective, a pretty dang good bill, lowering the amount of money the government is stealing from us. Hannah,
I'm so excited we have something we could show up and support. Really, like, we always go in and we're fighting, right? We're all these bad bills. Here in Colorado, lucky us, we have a ton of bad bills. It's rare that we have such good bills we can show up and fight. This is one thing that would really help the economy here in Colorado, right? It sounds like, lost revenue. That seems like, that's probably not good for the economy. But actually, when the government is losing income, people are gaining more. And so overall, that's great for the economy. And we all know this economy, it's rough.
Absolutely. I'll just add to that. I mean, people getting more money back means that they will have the ability to choose how that money is spent, which whether it's for their home or healthcare or other businesses, that revenue is being directed from the own individuals versus the government going through their crony systems. And like we know, in some of the counties are paying the spouses lots and lots of money just to try and figure out how to keep more of our tax money. So I'm very supportive of this. 4.0 is a good start, and look forward to future reductions of that.
100%. Yeah, the only criticism is the bill doesn't go far enough. It should abolish the state income tax. That's really what needs to happen, and definitely a goal of the Colorado Liberty Movement for sure. But nonetheless, if you're down at the state capitol tomorrow, you're down in Denver, maybe you can take a lunch break. Show up to House Committee Room 112. It's on the first floor at about 1:30 p.m., where this bill will be heard, and make your support known. You can also reach out to the people on that committee. You can click into that committee here when you're on the website. Just click where it says finance. You can see all the what they're talking about that day, and it's probably easier actually going to committees and go into finance here, both for Senate and House. You can click into the committees, find those individuals there, and reach out to them directly, and of course let your elected representative know that you support this legislation. So great bill being heard tomorrow. Let's hope it's not in the kill committee. So, I mean, that's a positive sign. Of course, I'm really worried that the Democrats are going to try and add an amendment to the bill, because they certainly could amend the bill to maybe not reduce state income tax the way we think it should. Maybe they'll take it out of how Tabor refunds are being applied as opposed to just a flat cut or some other shenanigans. I would not be surprised at all if they try and introduce some amendment to create some shenanigans around this. Looking at the rest of the bills being heard in the House Finance Committee hearing tomorrow, adjusting certain tax expenditures, senior housing income tax credit, tax policy analysis by the legislative branch. We won't get into any of those, but definitely check it out if you're interested. All right, so back to Senate Education. We'll take a look and see what's in the Senate Education Committee tomorrow. Public Employees Retirement Association, that's PARA, employment after retirement for rural schools, and then distribution of state share of district total program. So some bills there if you're really heavily invested in the education scheme in Colorado, but nothing we're going to talk about tonight. So that is Senate Education. Moving on to Senate Judiciary. Some bills there that might be interesting to people. Senate Bill 74, jurisdiction over United States military property. If the military and the state government's working together on some sort of project, it kind of clarifies the jurisdiction issue, and then prohibit attorney fees on personal injury interest. So some interesting bills there. I won't get into any of those tonight. Senate Transportation and Energy meeting at 1:30 tomorrow. Look at that one here. Now that here we got a really bad bill being heard in this committee, and that is the Mobile Electronic Devices and Motor Vehicle Driving Bill, Senate Bill 65. This is definitely another bad one. So right now in Colorado, of course, the camel's nose under the tent was pushing this law originally, where it was 18 years of age and younger, or those under 18, were penalized if they had a mobile electronic device while driving. That was the first iteration of this bill many years ago. Well, of course, now they want to expand it to everybody. They want to expand it to every individual who's 18 years of age or older. If you're using a mobile electronic device, then they want to create a new civil penalty. $75, 2 license points. Second offense within 2 years, $150 and 3 license points. For a third or additional offense after that, 24 months, within 24 months, $250 and 4 license suspension points. So, everybody's on their phones. Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
They've had this implemented in California since before 2005. So this does not surprise me that we're seeing this come up here, right? A lot of those policies that have crippled and crumbled the Republic of California are now imported here into Colorado. So I'm not surprised to see this at all come through.
Definitely. So really bad bill. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous that Democrats in this post George Floyd, post Black Lives Matter era want to create more reasons for law enforcement to pull over individuals, more reasons to create police encounters, more reasons to create potential violence between law enforcement and individuals just going about their day. So a really shameful bill from those who are supposed to be standing up for criminal justice reform. But generally just a bad bill overall. I mean, we're individuals, we're adults. If we are being safe and maybe have our phone out for half a second because we're getting a phone call from somebody that might be an emergency, we should be able to have that right without fear. Now, fear that law enforcement's going to go after us. So, really bad bill. Please speak out against this. This is tomorrow, February 12th, in the Transportation and Energy Committee, Senate Committee Room, 352 at 1:30 p.m. So, Senate Committee Room is in the state capitol. 352 on the third floor, 1:30 p.m. Bennett in the chats, does this mean we can't use a map app? Well, not if you're holding it in your hand, Bennett.
Yep.
As Hannah just said, if it's hands-free, then you should be okay. If it's built into your car, then you can use it. But bad bill, definitely more infringements on our rights. And then there also in the Transportation and Energy Committee hearing will be clarifying environmental response surcharge. I won't get into that one. So moving into the House, State, Civic, and Military Veterans Affairs, the last committee hearing of Monday, that otherwise known as the Kill Committee. Let's see what's going on in there tomorrow. So this one is very interesting. I'd say Ken DeGraff, a good guy, a good pro-liberty leader down at the state capitol. Very interesting bill here. I'd like to get other people's perspective on this, but I kind of like this bill. House Bill 1145, modify voter registration page on Secretary of State website. So, we can basically imagine this bill will be killed, I'm sure. But nonetheless, if the bill did end up getting passed, or here's what the bill would do. So, but by July 1st, 2024, the Secretary of State is required to include on the voter registration page on the Secretary of State's official website places for a registered elector to confirm the registered elector's mailing address, select whether to receive a mail ballot or to vote in person, and select which major political party's ballot to receive for a primary election. The Secretary of State is required to ensure that the default selection for every registered elector for each election is to vote in person. So this is definitely a pushing back against the all mail-in voting that Colorado really is trying to push. The Secretary of State is required to add a notice to the website to explain the costs incurred in sending mail ballots to registered electors and the amount of taxpayer money that is wasted by sending mail ballots that will not be used. So the bill does quite a bit more as well. That's some of the key headlines of it there, but I'd love to get your perspective. Hannah, what do you think about this bill?
So I think that it's great because, I mean, there is that cost, right? Think about the cost of all those mail-in ballots that don't get used. That's crazy. I never thought of that before. And I'm also in favor of in-person voting versus mail-in ballots as a former county clerk candidate that ran on election integrity. This hits a little close to my heart as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Hannah. I think this is a good thing. And certainly there's been a lot of concern given how poorly the Secretary of State has managed the voter rolls with, what's been in the news already. There's a lot of worry that when the newcomers are getting their driver's licenses, that they're also automatically being registered to vote against state and federal law. So I think anything we can do to try and make the elections truly more secure, I think it's something we should support.
100% yes. And there's so much fraud potential with mail-in voting, so many issues and expense, as DeGraff says in his bill here. So Monday, February 12th, in the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee at 1:30 p.m., please show up to testify in support of this bill. It's important to show our liberty leaders down there that the public is behind them, to challenge the authoritarians who are going to try and stop this bill from being passed and make your voice heard. So another big bill tomorrow. So just kind of recapping what we saw for Monday, looking at our sheet here. Some good bills, reduction of state income tax rate and the modified voter registration, and then a really bad bill on that mobile electronic devices. So at least 3 big bills being heard tomorrow at the state capitol. But let's go ahead and move on to Tuesday. So Tuesday morning, 7:30 Appropriations Committee. We won't go into that. 8 a.m. is the Joint Technology Committee. Won't go into that. 8 a.m. Legislative Audit Committee. And then 9 a.m., the House and the Senate as a whole meet. Always interesting to be down there for that. But upon adjournment, so it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes for people to get down there to testify. Upon adjournment, that Senate or House could go for an hour, could go for 2 hours, could go for 3 hours. If you want to testify in any committee that is upon adjournment, you really have to be down there early. You have to be ready to testify as soon as they end the business for the day. So let's look at the House Health and Human Services Committee. That's meeting here on Tuesday. There's a review hearing for a sunset on a Physical Therapy Practice Act, prescription drug label accessibility. Pretty dumb bill there. Kind of looked into that one. Didn't think we should go too much into it, but basically trying to make it so that pharmacies have additional requirements in terms of making sure that somebody who has a disability of some kind or unable to understand what's on the bill, on the prescription label, or can't read it, that they have other ways to have access to it. And then credit for paid health insurance deductible. So that's what's going on in the Health and Human Services Committee tomorrow. Joint Budget Committee, we won't talk about. Obviously, a very important committee that determines what the budget's going to be for the state. But we'll move on to the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. Also upon adjournment. 2 bills, local government property tax credits, rebates, and coroner qualifications. This local government property tax credits rebates is probably a bad bill. I didn't know if we want to get into it, but basically allowing the local governments to kind of stimulate their development by offering these property tax credits for certain types of property development they want to see in their communities. Kind of a, not a major bill there, but could talk about it if you'd like. And then coroner qualifications. So making it that a coroner has to be a member of some national organization that the government's picking. So not a good one there, but nothing too crazy unless either of you, Mayor Lamb or Hannah, want to go into that.
Yeah, but one of my good friends here is studying to be a coroner, so I'm going to let her know about that.
Perfect. We can take a look at it. Basically, in order to be a coroner with a population greater than 150,000 in that county, you have to be in good standing with the American Board of Medico-Legal Death Investigators or a forensic pathologist certified by, and in good standing with the American Board of Pathology. So it's creating new qualifications, making it harder, which of course is an elected position, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Probably not a good thing. You should let the voters decide, right? If we believe in democracy.
Yep.
I agree. Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say, but yeah, I'm opposed to this bill. And again, another example of just looking at who the sponsors are, and it makes it very easy.
So if anybody who is maybe in that field to be an aspiring coroner or interested in preserving the integrity of your local government and not requiring some sort of national medical, organization to determine who's your coroner, then this is going to be heard Tuesday, February 13th in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee in the Old State Library upon adjournment of the House. So that's what we got going on. Let's take a look at the next committee here. House Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m. Here's one of the worst bills of the week, and that is the Concealed Carry Permits and Training Bill. I know RMGO had been really focusing on this one. It's one of the worst bills to make it very difficult for an individual to get their concealed carry permit. So again, looking at the sponsors, we have some authoritarians like Kyle Mullica, Monica Durand, and Mark Snyder down there pushing this, making it much more difficult. So if this,
I can't
yeah,
stand him.
oh, he's the worst. He's the worst. So basically, if this bill passes, then starting in July 2025, it would require concealed handgun training classes to be held in person, include instruction regarding knowledge and safe handling of firearms and ammunition, safe storage of firearms and child safety, safe firearm shooting fundamentals, federal and state laws pertaining to lawful purchase, ownership, transportation, use, and possession, state law pertaining to the use of deadly force for self-defense, and techniques for avoiding a criminal attack and how to manage a violent confrontation, including conflict resolution and judgmental use of lethal force. Now, all of that's well and good, doesn't seem too egregious, but here we go down here. A student must achieve a passing score on a written concealed handgun competency exam and in a live fire exercise to complete an initial class. An initial class must provide at least 8 hours of instruction, including the live fire exercise and written exam. Then the bill requires completion of an initial class or a concealed handgun refresher class for renewal of a permit unless an exemption applies. A student in a refresher class must demonstrate safety and competence with the handgun. The refresher class must be held in person, be taught by a verified instructor, include instruction on changes to the law, and require a passing score in a live fire exercise and a written exam. A refresher class must provide at least 2 hours of instruction, including the live fire and written exam. So, I mean, absolutely ridiculous here how difficult they want to make it for individuals to be carrying concealed lawfully, right?
What's crazy is so that's expensive, right? So that puts it out of the hands of like people who probably need guns the most. When you're in lower class neighborhoods and things like that, they tend to be very dangerous. As a woman, I find this egregious. Making the process harder, right? And I'm a domestic violence survivor. I've had to have a restraining order against one of my exes before. It was a very terrifying situation. So making it harder for women, like in situations like that, to be able to conceal carry to protect themselves, their children, like all of the ways that this like adds more to what exists, it makes it more expensive and harder to access, especially for the people that need it. And then also think about the test taking, right? As I'm a homeschool mom, I know how all of my kids test and like what are their weaknesses and strengths. A lot of people, particularly now, struggle with test taking, right? Um, so it just puts it further and further out of the hands of people to be able to exercise this actual right granted to us in the Constitution. That I hate it.
I strongly agree. And Hannah, you couldn't said any better. I have nothing further to add.
100% terrible bill. Really, really bad. It also creates a new firearm safety instructor verification. So the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has to verify instructors of the classes and post a list of the verified instructors online and get a fee on them, put a fee on anybody who's going to be an instructor. So this is going backwards. It is violating the rights of the people of Colorado, making it more difficult for us to exercise our ability to defend ourselves and our families. So if you're please, 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 if there's nothing else you get involved in this week, then focus on this bill. Really, really egregious. So Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. in the Judiciary Committee in House Committee Room 107. So please show up, reach out to House Judiciary Committee members, tell them you're in opposition to this bill, reach out to your elected representative, and please show up in person if at all possible to speak out against this bad bill. So looking at the committee hearing, the same committee, House Judiciary, protection orders for victims of crimes, study metrics to measure criminal system success. I don't know if we want to go into either of those. Maybe the protection orders we can take a quick peek at, though, because that might be interesting.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Looks like it mostly clarifies the venue for filing a motion or complaint for a civil protection order. Authorizes a judge or magistrate to continue the temporary protection order for a period of not more than 1 year after the date when the permanent protection order hearing takes place. Bill requires the court to encourage the petitioner to notify the respondent if the petitioner intends not to appear at the permanent protection order hearing. It prohibits service upon the respondent and upon the person to be protected if the temporary protection order is denied, or if the petitioner moves to vacate the temporary protection order prior to the court receiving confirmation that the respondent was personally served or the actual knowledge of the request for the protection order. So a lot that this bill does. in terms of changing how protection orders are issued here in Colorado.
Yeah, I don't have a stance on it offhand. I'd have to look into it further. It's very detailed, so I'm sure they snuck some terrible things in here too.
Yeah, I'm looking at the fiscal note just to see if anything stands out. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. If anybody has any information on it, please pass it along. But we'll go ahead and move on. From the House Judiciary Committee to the Senate Business, Labor, and Technology meeting at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So another really bad bill, this perfluoroalkali and polyfluoroalkali chemicals ban. This is a very bad bill. Senate Bill 81. These PFAS chemicals are the big bad guys now, apparently, and the government's trying to go after them to ban them. Would do a lot, unfortunately, to make industries suffer. Industries here in Colorado, manufacturers would not have access to the most common types of chemicals used in production of a lot of products. So this bill I was alerted to because there was an article here in the American Chemistry Council saying that this bill would create major problems for Colorado. This bill threatens to create major disruptions for families and businesses across the state. It would ban an entire class of chemicals known as PFAS. They're integral to industries ranging from semiconductors to clean energy to healthcare to aerospace. So, I mean, every industry seems to use these: renewable energy, semiconductors, healthcare technology, pharmaceuticals, transportation, air travel. They all have used these chemicals. So that information, we'll pass that along if anybody's interested. But definitely a bad bill here. This bill does mention that they would ban the sale and distribution of cleaning products, cookware, dental floss, menstruation products, ski wax, and textile articles that contain intentionally added PFAS chemicals. So, I mean, just to give you an idea of the scope, it could be literally anything that has plastic in it in Colorado, it seems. Mayor Lamb, you have some background on this one?
Yeah, just a little bit. It was one of the issues that I became aware of when I was running for office. There was a statement made by the town staff to the citizens that PFAS were found in our water, which wasn't unique to us. Most of the Front Range cities and towns have had PFAS found recently. It wasn't something that was really tested previously. As far as I know, the EPA doesn't actually regulate it right now as what is a safe amount. So again, it was before I was elected, so the town had just advised people to get carbon filters, and that would take care of it. But there was also a working theory that I'm not sure if it's still the main one, that they're at the Denver airport. Some of the firefighters used a chemical that contained PFAS that had then been absorbed into our aquifers, but it doesn't really fully explain it as it is found in areas that are far away from the airport. So I think it's one of those new things, but certainly just a blanket ban on them isn't the correct answer. And especially given how expensive everything already is, and you just putting additional pressure, I think is not a good idea.
And think about pink tax, right? We haven't already complained about that. So if you're changing whatever we're using as far as administration products, it's going to drive up the cost as a whole. So that's going to increase. So all these leftists who are like, yeah, this is good. Well, you just increased the pink tax more. Good job.
Yeah, and again, just how far this is used. I mean, it is almost every product, as Brandon went over. So it would affect every aspect, and certainly just increase the costs, as these companies would have to scramble to find an alternative that is more than likely going to be more expensive, or they would already be using it, because that's how economics works.
Frank in the chat says there are no longer any ski wax products sold that contain PFAS. These days, all the manufacturers have modified their products to be plant-based. So interesting there. But yeah, the PFAS, apparently anything that is maybe heat, water, oil resistance. So stain resistant fabrics, water repellent clothing. Think of all the outdoor industries Colorado has, with people, their jackets, North Face or whatever out there, Columbia, whatever it is. So making it a lot harder for those products to be available in Colorado. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. So one of these do-gooding bills. Also, three terrible state legislators who love to increase the size of government are sponsoring this bill. So please, any individual out there who's capable of it, go against this bill. Speak out, stand up, show up if you can. The Business, Labor, and Technology Committee on February 13th at 2 p.m. in the old Supreme Court. Moving on to the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government. They're having a joint committee hearing with the Senate, Local Government, and Housing. Usually those are just usual presentations. So they're going to have some presentations, which could be interesting on housing bills for anybody interested in land use or development or zoning. This could be interesting. You having the Colorado Municipal League, Colorado Counties Inc., and the Special District Association of Colorado, three of the big groups that opposed Proposition HH last year, which is interesting. They'll be having a panel presentation in front of these legislators. So that could be very, very interesting. And then at 3:30 p.m., just the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee will meet on Tuesday. Child passenger safety and education. They're creating basically like a grant program for money so people can buy car seats and they can inform and educate the public about child safety. 4 p.m. Executive Committee of the Legislative Council. So that's what we got on Tuesday on the agenda there. So just recapping. Sorry, go ahead,
Brandon,
Aaron.
Yeah, I'll just say I've been very pleasantly surprised at by CML as an organization. Of course, our town and all cities and towns in Colorado, except for two, are a member of CML, and they've been really strong on local control. So I'm not sure they're going to oppose this, and it'll be interesting, like you said, to see exactly what their angle is and how they try to persuade the legislators.
Yeah, CML is basically the lobbyist group for the municipalities across Colorado, so all the towns and cities. CML is to represent them and represent their ability to govern or manage their communities the way they want to. So oftentimes, maybe not all the time, but oftentimes disagreeing with how the state government wants to enforce things into their areas. So just to recap for Tuesday, worst bill of the week, one of the worst, the concealed carry permits and training requirement. Of course, as we all know, just not to harp on that one, but criminals are not going to follow any of those rules. Criminals are not going to go get their permit at all. So making it harder for somebody who wants to obey the law to carry a firearm. I mean, you're just setting up a situation. This is a pro-criminal bill, and then the PFA's ban on Tuesday as well. So two bad bills there. But let's go ahead and move on to Wednesday. The Senate meeting at 9 a.m. here. And then upon adjournment, we have the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee. Let's take a look at what's going on in that committee. Sunset reviews of a plumbing board and a banking and state banking board. Upon adjournment, House Education. School mental health professional loan repayment program and an adult education, just allowing for adults to basically get their degrees or certificates through a different avenue compared to just colleges. So nothing too exciting there. Joint Budget Committee upon adjournment. And then 1:30 p.m. Senate Education on Wednesday, Valentine's Day. School of Mines Board of Trustees, Coors, is going to be there to talk about something. 1:30 p.m. Senate Judiciary Committee. So here we go. This is two very interesting bills. Wednesday, Valentine's Day, February 14th. If anybody can be down, any pro-liberty individuals can be down at the state capitol at 1:30 p.m. in the old Supreme Court. You can see this bill here, Senate Bill 84 being discussed. Now, this one is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Senate Bill 84 is called Attorney General Duties to Prevent Mis- and Disinformation, concerning a requirement that the Attorney General undertake certain measures in an effort to prevent the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation, and in connection therewith, making an appropriation. So here we go. To prevent and combat the sharing and spreading of misinformation and disinformation, the Attorney General is required to establish an initiative to encourage respectful engagement and discourse, develop and share a curriculum to facilitate productive and honest conversations regarding statewide and national issues to help people find common ground, and collaborate with organizations across the state to develop and update the materials that are used in connection with the curriculum. The Attorney General is also required to study how the internet and other media channels, including social media platforms, are used to share and spread misinformation and disinformation. In addition, the Attorney General is required to review relevant state and federal constitutional provisions and federal laws and regulations to address preemption and the intersection of state and federal authority. The Attorney General may invite experts to collaborate or consult with the Attorney General or to provide other assistance to the Attorney General in performing the duties specified in this bill. The Attorney General is required to publish a report of its findings and to submit the report to the Judiciary Committees of the Senate and House of Representatives. The report must include recommendations for state legislation. So just go ahead and take a look at the fiscal note here to see if there was anything that maybe wasn't there in the summary. So by March 2025, the Attorney General would have to report on these activities and provide legislative recommendations on these topics to the state legislators. So it's going to cost $150,000. Given the Attorney General's office another $150,000 to do this. But what do you think on this one, Chairwoman?
I feel like Lorena Garcia is the last person we should be letting make a law about what is misinformation and disinformation, because her takes are so awful. And she herself spreads plenty of misinformation and disinformation. So that's quite something. Should the government be encroaching on the First Amendment? And should we be paying them to do so? $150,000 a year? Like, for sure, no. Yep, it is censorship and industrial complex nonsense, but that is both Lisa Cutter and Lorena Garcia. If they were put into a bill, this is what would come out. So if they had a baby, we're looking at it. Ugly.
Absolutely agree. I think the government, whether it's the state of Colorado or even my own town, should not be the arbiter of truth. It is absolutely up for each voter to decide, look into the information themselves. And this certainly seems to be the lead up for some kind of censorship regime, like is
Yes.
common in some of the European countries, where it's unbelievable how far they've gone.
And people,
100%.
they don't even understand when I say, no, there's like socialists and communists in our legislature. And you can tell by bills like this. Radical extremists of the left. About time we start calling them what they are.
Oh yeah, I always have to clarify that to friends and family that are out of state. Like, no, I'm not just being, hyperbolic. Calling Democrats socialists. These are literal members of the Denver Socialist Party. They are also Democrats, and they got appointed, not even elected, because nobody would actually vote for this crap. At least I would hope.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's wild. Lorena Garcia, last year was one of the sponsors of the assault weapons ban. So she wants to ban our guns. She wants the government to tell us what's truth and what's not, try and figure out the constitutional limit on what they can do to go after individuals who are spreading information on the internet that they disagree with. Absolutely and utterly despicable behavior from somebody who's supposed to be a representative of the people and following a totally disgusting bill. And let's hope there's enough public outcry against this. And really, Lisa Cutter is definitely one of the targets I know for the 2024 elections. So we'll see if what effect this might have on her race.
And for sure, both of these legislators are on the LPCO radar and they're on notice.
So that's Wednesday, February 14th at 1:30 p.m. in the judiciary. Please, anybody show up, speak out against this bill. Reach out to the Senate Judiciary Committee members. Let them know that you're against this as well and that people are watching them, right? Sometimes it's just enough to know in this important election year that there's a lot of concerned individuals, concerned voters watching this kind of legislation, and it's not in the best interest of the legislators who might lose their race to support something as ridiculous as this. All right, so another interesting bill in that same committee hearing is possess identification while driving. Pretty interesting bill here. Doesn't seem like something I would agree with. We have some interesting people here. So according to this bill, possess identification without driving, Senate Bill 90, it says under existing law, a driver must be in immediate possession of the driver's license or instruction permit while driving. The bill allows a driver who is not in possession of the person's physical driver's license or permit to possess and present a digital license or permit instead. So for those who don't know, Colorado does have a state-funded, state-controlled digital ID. This is allowing digital ID to be used in place of a physical driver's license. And kind of the idea is, moving everybody into this digital system. So it says under existing law, it is a Class A traffic infraction for a driver who is in possession of a driver's license, instruction permit, or identification card to refuse to provide that identification upon request to a peace officer who reasonably suspects the driver has violated a traffic law. The bill requires a person who has in the person's possession a digital driver's license or identification card to provide the digital identification upon request to a peace officer who reasonably suspects the driver has violated a traffic law. The bill makes it a Class 2 misdemeanor traffic offense to refuse to provide a driver's license, instruction permit, identification card, or digital identification to a peace officer. The bill removes the specified penalty and surcharge for the traffic infraction. The bill
Is it
permits a
always a
driver.
class 2 misdemeanor?
They
Or
said it
is
was a
that, are
Class
they,
A traffic infraction. I'm not
okay,
entirely sure what the difference is. Maybe the fiscal note will tell us.
okay.
Under current law here, this says it's a Class B traffic infraction in the fiscal note. Um, Under current law, that's if you drive without a physical driver's license. It's a Class A traffic infraction, refuse to show the license. So it modifies the offense of driving without a driver's license in one's possessions. Let's see here. So from fiscal year 2020 to 2023, there's been
Yeah.
1,087 individuals who have been convicted and sentenced for this existing offense. Of the persons convicted, 714 were male, 362 were female, 11 were unknown, 832 were white, 109 were Black African American, 92 were Hispanic, 5 were Asian, 4 were American Indian, and 27 classified as other. 18 did not have a race identified. So it reclassifies the existing offense of refusing to present a driver's license from a Class A traffic infraction to a Class 2 traffic misdemeanor. So 6
So,
individuals from 2020 to 23 were convicted and sentenced for this existing offense.
so let's throw more people in jail for not having a piece of paper. What? And not to
Frank,
mention the digital aspect of all of this. Um, so increasing the crime, like yes, infractions are lower than misdemeanors, infraction, misdemeanor, felony, and then they all have different ranges, right? So that's insane to increase the crime. That's going to increase crime rates, like right off the rip.
And of course, Gabe, the cop Evans, is
Of
a
course.
sponsor of this. And when we saw what he did last week with civil assets forfeiture, he is always going to be on the side of the cops. And as we know, crime rates already through the roof. So increasing it even higher is just more justification for more spending on the police forces and creation of these stupid task force through CBI.
Yep. One more
100%.
reason we're coming for Gabe Evans.
Definitely a bad bill for liberty. A bill, like you said, increasing that penalty for not having an ID is dumb, absolutely authoritarian. Frank in the chat said infractions are usually less severe than misdemeanors. As you had said, Hannah, thanks for pointing that out. But yeah, a bad bill, and of course, yeah, making it easier for people to accept this new digital system in which everything's just on your phone. So bad bill being heard Wednesday, February 14th in the Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m. So if you end up down there at the state capitol, you got 2 bills to go against. This Attorney General mis and disinformation and the identification while driving. So that will be an interesting committee hearing. All right, moving on from that committee hearing, close that out. 1:30 p.m. the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee to repeal a former 2011 recommendation requirement. Not interested in that too much. 1:30 p.m. House Health and Human Services on Wednesday. A behavioral health grant for capital project. rulemaking authority of the executive director of the Department of Early Childhood Sunset Review hearing. So if you're interested in those bills, 1:30 p.m. House Judiciary. Some interesting bills here. We've talked about this one briefly in previous weeks. House Bill 1130, privacy of biometric identifiers and data. So they want to expand the Colorado privacy laws to include your biometric identifiers. So it includes like your brainwave patterns, any information. They want to make that a little bit more private. I mean, they're really only making it more private from private businesses. They're trying to get privacy from private businesses, but not government. So, take that for what it is. Penalty for theft of firearms. House Bill 1162. This just increases that penalty. It makes it an automatic worse felony than it is now for somebody stealing any type of gun. I mean, of course, theft is bad, so nothing too interesting on that one, I would say. Truth in sentencing, parole, violent offenses. I thought this one was probably worth talking about, though. So crime bills are a big deal. Obviously, Colorado's experiencing a lot of crime. So whether this bill passes or not, of course, there's some strategy down there from the Republican minority to try and get Democrats to vote against crime bills, right? Because then they can peg these opponents, these political opponents, to say, hey, they're soft on crime. They refuse to go after criminals to lock them up. So kind of interesting. I'm not sure necessarily that I would agree 100% with this bill, but I wanted to bring it up because these crime bills, definitely there's some strategy there for the elections. So House Bill 1127, truth in sentencing, parole, violent offenses. So under existing law, an offender convicted of certain violent offenses is eligible for parole after the person has served 75% of the sentence imposed upon the offender, less earned time granted by the Department of Corrections. The bill requires an offender sentenced for second-degree murder, first-degree assault, first-degree kidnapping, unless the first-degree kidnapping is a Class 1 felony, sexual assault, first-degree arson, first-degree burglary, or aggravated robbery, committed on or after July 1st, 2024. So they'd have to serve at least 85% of the imposed sentence before they're eligible for parole. So right now it's 75%. It's hard to say if the court or the criminal justice system, somebody's been there for 75% of their sentence and they seem like they've reformed or it's worth letting them out. Maybe it is. I don't know. To make it this mandatory 85%, this mandatory minimum doesn't necessarily sit well from a libertarian perspective, I would say. The bill also requires an offender sentenced for the enumerated crimes committed to serve 100% of the sentence imposed if the person has twice previously been convicted of a crime of violence. So this reminds me of, California's three strikes type of situation, right? If this is your third time, now you got to serve 100% of it. I get it. I get that violent crime is a major issue. I don't know that this is necessarily the solution to it, but I got to say, if Democrats kill this bill in the House Judiciary Committee, that would be really good for Republicans going into the election. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'll give you my thoughts on it because I lived in California and I know a lot about the three strikes law there. It touched many lives of people I know very intimately. So the three strikes law in California did absolutely nothing to reduce crime, particularly violent crime. In fact, you see a rise in crime from that. Granted, in the 90s, they went like hardcore authoritarian crazy. There was actually a guy that he was put in prison for life because he stole a pack of cigarettes, which was his third felony. And with that case, they actually started reducing some of the ways that the strike program worked. But so eventually that guy got out and he did not have to serve life in prison for stealing a pack of cigarettes. Granted, stealing is not great, right? Of course, I love private property and upholding property rights. Life in prison is pretty extreme for that crime, for sure. I don't like to see an increase in sentencing because I don't necessarily trust the state, right? Yes, there's criminals and there's bad people, but at the same time, plenty of people are victimized by the state and are put wrongfully imprisoned, or sometimes there's crazy enhancements that go on a sentence that make the sentence be increased by 3 or 4 times the original actual crime committed. So there's a lot of reasons why I would want to keep these lower rather than higher. And I know that a lot of people get uncomfortable talking about that.
Mayor Lamb, do you have a perspective on this one?
Yeah, I'm really conflicted on it, quite frankly. I mean, ultimately, I do expect that it's going to be killed in the kill committee. So this is just being put out there as a political tool, as you said, something that the Republicans can run on. And as we all know, crime is a really big problem in Colorado, more or less in Denver area, much more than our small communities out here. But at the same time, I mean, I completely agree with Hannah that there's already enough people that are being arrested for these crazy crimes. I one thing I do like about it is it's specifying violent crimes versus just any felony. Because you know, that, as the example you gave, getting life in prison for a pack of cigarettes is unbelievable. I mean, I know there's still quite a few people that are in prison for life for simple marijuana. Some were selling, but you know, nonviolent type crimes. So that's where I kind of am conflicted, and I don't really think it matters ultimately, as it is going to get killed, and it's just going to be a political tool for the Republicans in the fall race.
Yeah, good points all around. Hannah, I completely agree that, this is probably a bad thing. I would say, these mandatory minimums, I don't think there's a positive aspect there. I think every case can be unique, and I get it, but if somebody's there 75% of their time, as opposed to 85% of the time, how much of it is that really going to reduce our crime, right?
And
So,
how much more does the taxpayer pay to hold those people in prison that long?
Great point.
Um, that's something I really would like my taxes reduced. I would
yeah,
like to keep that for me, not paying for guys in prison.
good point. So anybody who's against this bill, Wednesday, February 14th in the House Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m., you can show up, testify, have your voice heard. Also reach out to those Judiciary Committee members and let them know your perspective on it. So those are the three bills being heard in the House Judiciary Committee this Wednesday. Let's move on to the last committee hearing for Wednesday, the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government in the Old State Library. Let's see what they're going to be talking about. House Bill 1078, regulation of community association managers. I wasn't quite sure what a community association was, but they want to create some new requirements of who can be a manager for a community association. Didn't seem like it was exactly the same as a homeowners association, but I imagine some similar. So I don't know too much about that bill. But House Bill 1098, definitely a very bad bill. Cause required for eviction of a residential tenant. So we saw this similar bills come up last year. Uh, Representative Marbury's like an evictions lawyer. That's like his day job before he became a legislator. So this is like his pet project is pushing this. But basically, they want to make it more difficult for property owners, for landlords, for property management companies to kick people out of that property. So this definitely hurts private property rights. It hurts the ability of rental companies or rental owners to have control over their own property. This is an anti-liberty bill and would basically create a new scheme where the state government can be monitoring how property owners are renting their property out and have this crazy set of rules that they have to follow. I mean, it's going to make it more difficult for mom and pop rental companies or rental people. Maybe a retiree couple owns a duplex or two. This is going to make it a little bit harder. You can see this is a long bill summary compared to some of the others we saw. We'll jump into the fiscal note here just to see if there's any better summary of it. But just quickly, the bill establishes a for-cause eviction policy in state law that prohibits landlords from evicting tenants from residential properties without cause, subject to certain conditions and requirements specified in the bill. The bill outlines various reasons that a tenant may be evicted for cause, including, among other things, unlawful occupancy of the property, non-payment of rent, inhabiting a property beyond the term of the lease, substantial material or repeat violations of the terms of the lease, and the sale or transfer of the property under certain conditions. It also allows a landlord to initiate a no-fault eviction if the property is being demolished or converted, substantial repairs or renovations, occupancy of the property by a landlord, if they need it, end of time limited housing offered by a mission-driven organization, withdrawal of a property from a rental market for the purpose of selling it. So, of course, this also creates a situation in which landlords who do evict somebody must provide timely notice. If a landlord does not provide required notice, then they must provide relocation assistance in the form of 2 to 3 months' rent. Relocation assistance is not required for mission-driven organizations if the tenant was not using the property as their primary residence or if the tenant is a homeowner. Landlords cannot increase a tenant's rent in retaliation or discrimination in order to circumvent the requirements for this new for-cause eviction policy. Rental agreements are prohibited from including any provisions that waives the requirements of this bill. Tenants may sue landlords for violations. A landlord's failure to comply is an affirmative defense for the tenant. The bill also adds conforming language to statutes regarding unlawful entry to a property and notice to quit for tenants, for landlords and tenants that comply with the above provisions. So really, really horrific bill. What are your thoughts on this one, Hannah?
I have a lot. Um, so that's a whole lot of bullshit. I can't believe that that's so bad for property owners, right? So, the Libertarian Party, we're really big into protecting property rights. So, anyone that's saved up the money to be able to afford to have a property to invest in, such as a rental property of a residence, tenants don't necessarily have rights to that, right? There's a voluntary agreement when you sign a lease, and in that agreement, that's the government really just doesn't belong in the middle of those contractual things, or in the middle of any contractual thing, quite frankly. So it's going to just cause a lot more problems, and it's essentially robbing property owners and giving it to somebody that doesn't even own the property.
I strongly agree. I mean, this is an absolutely horrendous bill that I believe is just a way for Mabre, or however you pronounce his name, to get more clients, because it is certainly going to lead to a large increase in in this lawsuits that are related between the landlords and the tenants. I mean, it's something that, like was already said, you shouldn't have, the government should have no authority to get in between two individuals who are deciding on a contract and agreeing to it.
100%. Couldn't agree with either of you more. I mean, if an individual wants to rent the property for a specific term, specific payment, specific grounds for eviction, then that is entirely their right to do so. We don't need the state government or any government interfering with that. Uh, but yeah, I mean, the net effect on this, we know what's going to happen. You're making it more, these legislators are making it more difficult for rental property owners, which means you're going to have less rental properties. So you're either going to have increased costs or and lower supply. So of course, this is going to only exacerbate the problem in Denver specifically, but also throughout the entire metro area and a lot of Colorado. That's going to make it more difficult for individuals to be able to find property to rent. And that's also because, yeah, a mom and pop, person who's a little retiree couple, they even say, hey, it's not worth it anymore. We're selling our property. We're not going to have rentals. It's going to be the Walmart style corporate rental companies that come in that are willing to have a team of lawyers and handle all of this stuff for a price, of course, that are handling rentals. So bad bill, very bad bill being heard Wednesday, February 14th in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee, 1:30 p.m. in the Old State Library. Please show up, speak out, let your elected representative know that you oppose this legislation. Looking back, that was really it for the Wednesday committee hearings. So that's what we got from Wednesday. Just a quick recap. Attorney General duties to prevent mis and disinformation, possess identification while driving, truth in sentencing, parole, violent offenses, and the just cause eviction. We're going to move on to Thursday, the last day of the week, where committees are being heard, coming up here on Thursday, February 15th. So a couple early committees, the Joint Technology Committee, the Capital Development Committee, then the House and the Senate will meet. Once they adjourn, the House Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee will meet. Let's see what's on their agenda for Thursday. Water projects eligibility list, tax credit for transfer of agricultural asset, pet animal facility requirements for the euthanasia. Didn't necessarily want to get into any of those unless anybody else would. Moving on, upon adjournment of House and Senate Finance Committees, they're having a joint House and Senate Finance meeting. This could be very interesting for interested parties. If anybody's interested in Colorado's legal cannabis industry, there's a briefing from the MED, the Marijuana Enforcement Division from the Department of Revenue, Thursday, February 15th, upon adjournment of those two committees in the Old State Library. So check that out Thursday morning if you want to know more about what's going on in Colorado's marijuana industry. Upon adjournment as well, Senate Business, Labor, and Technology. Substance Use Disorders Recovery. This bill I did want to mention. So Thursday in the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, this is going to, of course, the state government, these politicians with their hubris think that they can pass legislation to help people recover from substance abuse. Now, of course, addiction is horrible. Alcohol addiction is claiming lives, countless lives across Colorado, but it's not the role of the state government to think they can get involved and make a difference. The big reason I wanted to talk about this bill, there's sections of the bill 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fine, but sections 5 and 6 place restrictions on where liquor licensed drugstores and fermented malt beverage and wine retailers may display alcohol beverages on the store's licensed premises. So, I mean, how ridiculous is this? They think that changing how the sellers of alcohol advertise their alcohol and the signs they list. I mean, it's just like tobacco, right? It's like them going after the tobacco industry with warning labels and signs. I just wanted to point out, if I can find it here towards that end piece here of those sections 5 and 6. So this would, if passed, a liquor license, drugstore license. By 2025, they would have to display all alcohol beverages accessible by and visible to a consumer in no more than one location on the retail sales floor. So that could be really challenging. Which location is not adjacent to a display of non-alcoholic beverages, so it can't be next to your Coca-Cola, must not exceed 1% of the total retail space unless the location is a cooler. So how ridiculous is this? I mean, they really think they're going to save people's lives through addiction by these requirements. They want to separate the display of alcohol beverages from the non-alcohol beverages with the display of one or more non-beverage products and another physical divider. I mean, these are ridiculous requirements that are going to do nothing to stop people from buying or consuming alcohol.
I'd love to
So you have
start,
to,
if I can, Brandon, just real quick.
yeah, jump in.
What alcoholic is going to a liquor store to buy Coca-Cola? That, I mean, it is completely nonsense from the beginning. Not to mention, I mean, the large, real big retailers, your Dave Co's, your Molly Spirits. How would this even possibly be workable other than the result would be they're not going to sell any non-alcoholic anything? That it would be like a dispensary that can't sell CBD or these other products. It has to only be marijuana. It's just completely nonsensical.
Yeah, I mean, think of a grocery store, right? That should be able to be selling this here. I mean, totally ridiculous. But don't worry, don't worry. The state government tells you if you put this sign up, that's a prominent sign, it's an easily readable sign. It meets all the requirements for format established by the executive director. You got to get their permission. The sign has to be no smaller than 1/2 inch boldface type. Quote, these beverages contain alcohol. Please read the label carefully. So that's what's going to do it. That's what's going to do it is posting this sign is going to, save all these extra people's lives. It's going to create these ridiculous requirements. So a fermented malt beverage and wine retailer, for the second part of it here, they would have to, I mean, it's enough. I mean, we went through enough of this, but it basically separate everything and put these signs up. So, I mean, it's totally ridiculous. It's hard to believe that an individual who wants to buy alcohol, whether they're going into a Walgreens or a King Supers or a Target, and they're not going to get confused by seeing a Mountain Dew and then seeing the alcoholic Mountain Dew, which is a new thing, believe it or not. So absolutely not really stupid bill from these ridiculous legislators who think they're actually doing a favor to society and going to help this substance abuse disorder recovery issue. So if you are in the alcohol business, this bill will be meeting Thursday, February 15th, or this bill will be discussed during this committee hearing Thursday, February 15th upon adjournment in the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee. So check that out if you are interested. Going back to Thursday on the House Finance Committee, let's see what they're talking about. Gabe Evans down there is putting in hard work. One of his crowning achievements this year is going to get a license plate made for first responders with disabilities. So that is his crowning achievement. These state legislators love getting new license plates for every manner of constituent, and that's what they're working on.
Well, it looks like he doesn't have any co-sponsors, so I doubt it'll go anywhere.
I'm so glad that he dedicated his energy in the middle of all of this economic crisis and war and, attacks on our liberties to to bring the thing that really matters to the Coloradan voter, license plates. What a difference he's going to make.
Yeah, and I'll just
Absolutely.
remind the viewers that each legislator is only allowed to sponsor and submit 5 pieces of legislation. So he deemed this to be so important that it made his top 5. It's truly mind blowing.
Well, they're going to do it this year. They're going to stop substance abuse and, get new license plates made. So they don't have to convene after all that. Frank says stunning and brave. And then extend contaminated land income tax credit. Didn't necessarily want to go into that. That's the House Finance Joint Budget Committee, the House State Civic and Military Veterans Affairs Committee. So this is the Kill Committee. Let's see what's going on there on Thursday upon adjournment of the State House. Military family occupational credentialing. Of course, special carve outs for people in the military. Won't really get into that too much, I don't think. But I did want to mention, as we talked about before, this political warfare idea, this minimum sentence crimes against prostituted children. So my only question is, if this is being sent to the Kill Committee and not the Judiciary Committee where it should be, are Democrats planning on killing this bill that would create minimum sentences for crimes against prostituted children? I mean, on this important election year, are Democrats really going to come out and say that they are against punishing people for committing crimes against prostituted children? I mean, Kevin Van Winkle, a good guy down there, State Senator Brandy Bradley as well. I've interviewed her before. Pretty good people. Might not agree with them 100% on liberty, but nonetheless, I think it's a good bill to be introduced. And let's have the Democrats have the Democrats kill this bill. I mean, have them kill the bill. Get that on their record that they're not protecting prostituted children. I mean, how can you? I mean, I don't know what else to say about this.
No, and I was confused by the wording of the language of the bill, whether it was increasing the sentences of the children themselves that have been exploited. And I'm sure the bill language clarifies that.
Right. Right. I mean, the people who commit crimes against children are definitely the scum of the earth and deserve probably worse than a 8 years in jail, 100%. But I thought this was an interesting bill specifically for people to pay attention to see if this bill does get killed. Because if I was running campaigns in November, I would want this plastered everywhere if I was running against a Democratic opponent. That they and they're
California they passed a law that it basically allows for prostitution, specifically child prostitution. So I'm also I'm not surprised that Democrats would kill a bill that provides a minimum sentence for crimes against prostituted children.
Yeah, it's quite the narrative there. Quite the narrative. I mean, for the election year, one of the big themes has to be this pro criminal policies being pushed by the ruling party in Denver. We see all this crime. If people are victims of crime or know somebody who is, you can blame the criminals, but you got to also share some of that responsibility with the government,
And you,
who's
you
not.
can't have a gun to defend yourself from these criminals. Oh no, that would be tragic.
So that's what's going on in the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee there. Looking at the Senate Finance. So Thursday's a very committee heavy day as usual. Some for action only, which means there shouldn't be any debate. Nothing too crazy there either. These bills have already been discussed. They might have just been pushed off for a vote because some other business came up or they ran out of time. So not an opportunity there for individual activism for the most part. Senate, local government housing. Let's see what's going on there on Thursday upon adjournment of the state Senate. A firefighter heart benefits trust and property tax distraint sale for mobile homes. So there's those two bills for people interested. 1:30 p.m. House Education is meeting on Thursday, where they will discuss one of the most controversial bills of the state legislature this year. So mark your calendars, folks. Thursday, February 15th at 1:30 p.m. House Bill 1039, non-legal name changes. This is the bill that allows children to basically come up with a preferred name that teachers must and school staff are required to follow, regardless of what parents say. The biggest controversy part of this bill is the fact that you're cutting parents out of the decision-making process for their children and allowing school staff to basically possibly even rename your kid at school. Maybe your kid is influenced by school staff and they all of a sudden decide that they have a new name and that school staff has to go along with it and you have no say in terms of what your child's name is. So really, really controversial bill. I'm sure we'll see some people down there at the Capitol testifying against this one.
It really sets the precedent for parental rights, right? Who owns your children, you or the state? And of course, we know that, the authoritarians like to say the state owns your children, therefore it doesn't matter what their name is because we will name them for you.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably bad bill. I was a pretty ornery student when I was in school and certainly had some teachers that I butted heads with. And I would have loved if this was something that I had an opportunity to use as a weapon against them. Changing my name every time they spoke to me and say, well, didn't you know? Can't you sense that I'm now this other person? And then, getting them in trouble and all this. So this, I think, just opens up the teachers for so much liability when we already have issues with retaining teachers in so many of these districts, particularly in the Denver metro area, where there's a large influx of these newcomers that have never been in school a day in their life, that might be in 5th grade or 6th grade, have never had to have that responsibility to sit still and be in a classroom environment, much less can even read or write their native language. So this is an incredibly horrible bill, and I will be truly shocked if they're able to get this through committee, much less through the greater house, even with their supermajority. I think this is going to be one that's even goes too far for the mainline Democrats that really are controlling it.
So Bennett in the chat says, what's the problem? Government has been giving new folks new names since Ellis Island opened. That's a pretty good one, Bennett. So from the fiscal note here, the bill deems a school's refusal to use a student's preferred name as a form of discrimination and establishes a task force in the Colorado Department of Education to provide guidance for school districts. So, if the teachers don't want to call your kid whatever new name that's out there, then they're discriminating against the kid, and I'm sure that opens them up to some issues, right? So that is definitely can be an issue, could be a problem. Attack on parental rights, it definitely making it life more difficult for school staff and teachers. Really glad you pointed that out, Mayor. And yeah, bad bill. Let's hope it fails. A lot of controversy over that one this year. So that's February 15th, this Thursday at 1:30 p.m. I'm sure that bill's going to gain a lot of traction, a lot of news stories. And for folks out there who want to have a voice, you can show up and have somebody tape your testimony, have somebody get on video. I mean, you should always be respectful and not make a scene, but you could have some fiery and passion testimony that can go viral online, right? We saw that with some of the other bills this year so far. So a really good opportunity for individuals maybe to go down there and have their voice heard. So that's at the House Education. Let's move on to the House Energy and Environment. We're almost done with the week here. Local government authority to regulate pesticides, kind of an interesting bill. Didn't want to go too much into it, but right now, I guess local governments are not able to regulate pesticides. Only the state can or the county, I think. So this would give them the ability to do so. So I can imagine we see Boulder County and some other places or the city of Boulder go after like Roundup or any of these types of things, which I mean, local control, I guess, let them. Not that they should necessarily be regulating anything, but so I don't know. Didn't really want to go into that one too much, but if anybody wanted to mention something about it, we could.
No, I don't really have anything to say about that. I mean, I do agree with you. It should be local control ultimately.
Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee at 1:30 on Thursday. I didn't know in Colorado you have to have certified potatoes. There's I'm sure the agriculture industry has a grip on what can and can't be planted because they want to have control over it, kind of state protections. This would change some of the rules in terms of being able to plant an uncertified potato. Hannah, do you know anything about uncertified potatoes?
Yeah, because I'm from Nebraska. Um, so I know a little bit about it, but only just from like a very agriculture perspective. So agricultural regulations around potatoes are far more relaxed in Nebraska than they are here in Colorado. Um, Potatoes do make up a large sector of the agriculture here in Colorado. I actually just went to my friend's potato farm for a homeschool co-op, so I can talk a little bit about that. What they want to prevent is like it has something to do with like the way that potatoes possibly can interact. And it's just like we only allow certain strains here because we only produce certain strains here just because of the regulation. I think it comes from like 1930s or something. It's really an old archaic law. But I get my potatoes from the Mennonites um, in Nebraska.
Nice.
So sounds really dumb and weird and archaic, and it is.
That's interesting. Yeah, this bill would clarify that uncertified potatoes may be planted only if they've been submitted and tested by the certifying authority of Colorado prior to the planting. So they just want to make sure that it's only certified potatoes. So I get it. There's diseases, other potato crops. I don't know enough
Yeah.
about the issue, but interesting bill for people. You're in the potato industry or agriculture industry. This is a bill to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah, and Phillips County has 3 different potato farms here.
Oh, nice. So that's the Agriculture and Natural Resources. Senate Health and Human Services at 1:30 on Thursday. Some interesting ones here. One I really only wanted to talk about, but there's the patient's right to provider information, licensed professional counselors in communities, Diabetes Prevention and Obesity Treatment Act, and continuity of healthcare coverage change. This Diabetes Prevention and Obesity Treatment Act I thought was pretty interesting. Of course, like we've discussed before, the state government, these politicians think they can do wonders. They think they can, save lives, of course, or do whatever they do. But this bill requires all private insurance companies to provide coverage for the treatment of the chronic disease of obesity and the treatment of prediabetes, including coverage for intensive behavioral or lifestyle therapy, bariatric surgery, and FDA approved anti obesity medication. So, I mean, obviously, this would I would imagine, increase insurance costs if insurances are now being mandated to cover more things than they would otherwise. Maybe it's not economical. So now they have to have new ways to pay for it, right? They can't just pay for it out of nothing. So, but of course, the state government's going to force insurance companies for behavioral and lifestyle therapy um, related to these issues. I think it's pretty ridiculous, pretty silly. And of course, it's only going to make health insurance more difficult, more expensive to be provided in Colorado. Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
I just strongly agree. I mean, I think it's very silly and surprising that the Democrats are pushing this forward, given they are also the party of body positivity and you're healthy at any size and all these other slogans that are contradictory to this. So I just find it interesting in that aspect, but unsurprising that they're trying to force more and more mandates for these insurance companies, which of course will only result in increasing the premiums.
Right.
My husband's very ill. He's been ill for a very long time. That's been really hard. The cost of treatment for my husband is insane, even with insurance. So anything that increases the cost of healthcare is very detrimental to my family, but many families across Colorado.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So that's what we got in the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate side on Thursday. Moving to the Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, their kill committee there at 1:30 p.m. on Thursday. Um, Veterans Community Living Centers Board of Commissioners presentation or meeting, and then voting for confined eligible electors. This bill, not that I want to get into it too much, but would make it easier for people who are confined or imprisoned to be able to vote. It would make it a lot easier for them to vote, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. Specifically, if a lot of people are arrested for maybe nonviolent crimes or drug crimes, that from a libertarian perspective, they could vote the right way to not get back in the same situation. So I didn't want to get too much into that unless anybody else does, but interesting bill there if you're interested in voting. So that bill I do expect to pass. Last bill we're going to talk about this week on the calendar, or the last committee hearing, excuse me, 1:30 p.m. on Thursday, the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee. Some interesting things here. Developer subdivision reservation deposits, adopt cosmetology licensor compact so cosmetologists can work between different states, marijuana industry and social equity. Basically, that bill would allow delivery of marijuana and some other special carve outs, but only for people who have the social equity checkbox checked on their marijuana, registration, basically, licensor. Increasing protections for minor workers, just increasing criminal penalties for employers or people who, violate labor laws for minors. Ex-offenders practice in regulated occupations. This is one of the ones I did want to mention specifically because it's another mandate on businesses requiring that businesses hire employees they wouldn't otherwise, right? Maybe they don't want to hire somebody who's an ex-offender. So House Bill 1004, ex-offenders practice in regulated occupations. So in determining whether an applicant for a state-regulated occupation is qualified to be registered, certified, or licensed, the bill allows the regulator to consider an applicant's conviction for a criminal offense if the criminal offense is a violent felony or misdemeanor. If an offense is not violent but would otherwise disqualify a person from becoming registered, certified, or licensed, the regulator of each profession is not permitted to consider the person's criminal conviction for the offense after a 3-year period has passed. The bill allows an individual to petition a regulator to determine whether a criminal conviction will preclude the person from becoming registered, certified, or licensed prior to that person completing any other requirement for such credentialing. So I guess in a way, rereading this here, if the state's regulating the occupation, even to sell cars in Colorado, you have to be licensed through the state. If this makes it easier to get those licenses, then maybe it is a good bill. So I might have misunderstood it there. The bill places the burden of proof for denial on an applicant on the regulator to demonstrate that denial based on the applicant's criminal conviction directly connects to potential performance in the occupation or profession for which the applicant seeks credentialing. So I don't know, any thoughts on that one from anybody?
I mean, I think this is a good bill overall. It gives the employer the opportunity to hire someone that the state previously would have prohibited. And again, I'm happy to see that it's still, is separating nonviolent crimes from violent crimes in that bill. And I mean, I'm sure all know people that have been in bad situations in previous time in their life, may have caught marijuana conviction back when it was still illegal, and now they are prohibited from, like you said, something as innocuous as selling cars. So I am in favor of this bill as it's currently being read.
Yep. Sounds like a good bill overall, actually. So that is the Business Affairs and Labor Committee on Thursday. So that rounds out the schedule for the week. For committee hearings, Friday, there's not much on the calendar. I thought this was interesting. Definitely something to pay attention to. They're at 2 p.m. on Friday at the State Capitol in Senate Committee Room 357. The Task Force for the Consideration of Facial Recognition Services will be meeting on their agenda. They don't have an agenda posted yet. But if anybody's interested in facial recognition services, that could be something worth paying attention to. I imagine as liberty-minded individuals, we care very much about privacy, so definitely something to be worried about. So just going back to Thursday, kind of recapping the day, the substance use disorders recovery, the one that hurts sellers of alcohol, places new burdens on them. The minimum sentence crimes against prostituted children, interesting bill there. Non-legal name changes, a very egregious bill that will make some national headlines and already has. The Obesity Treatment Act, and then the regulated occupation. So some interesting bills on Thursday. So that is the schedule for the week. So check out the legislative website for information there. Briefly, we'll go through some of the bills we've been tracking for the last several weeks. So you've probably heard these mentioned before. So this one is the protections for delivery network company drivers. So there was an article recently about, so this is like Uber, Lyft, like people who drive for any of those groups. This is going to place new burdens on the company, on the digital network company. and it's going to create new burdens on them, which is going to supposedly help the drivers out. But we know what this kind of regulations do. We've seen in California and other places where they've shut down a lot of these businesses because they don't want to adhere or are unable to adhere to these strict regulations. So we'll know more about this bill, I think, as it gets closer, but that's Thursday, February 22nd. So interesting bill there if people are into rideshare or interested in that kind of emergency technology. On the flip side, that Senate has a very similar bill to create this transportation network company transparency. Same kind of thing. This is rideshare companies. They want to make it more burdensome upon the companies, creating these new systems in which disclosures to the drivers about payments and amounts they're making and all of this and this is just going to make it harder for these rideshare companies to operate. And it's going to be on February 20th. So the gig economy is under attack as usual. The raw milk bill, we've been talking about this one since day one. The next committee hearing has not been scheduled yet. It will be going to appropriations. We talked about that this week. This is Tuesday, the concealed carry and permits training bill, bad bill. No committee hearing date yet on the Senate Bill 131 prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive spaces. This is the one where they want to make it illegal for law-abiding individuals to carry a firearm and to defend their community of faith, or another situation in which they would no longer legally be able to carry a firearm concealed on their persons. We'll keep you up to date on that one for sure. Really bad bill.
If I may, Brandon, I'm not sure if you all saw there was a shooting at a church in Texas today. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't wait and introduce this one near the very end of the session so that the news cycle will have passed. And, because I can't imagine that they would have the audacity to try and get this through just in the wake of an actual tragedy.
Yeah, no, great point. I'm sure that situation will come up on one discussion in the committee hearing eventually happens. Moving on, we talked about the mobile electronic devices. That's going to be tomorrow, Monday, the 12th. The non-legal name changes we mentioned on the 15th. Overdose prevention centers. So Elizabeth Epps' bill to allow safe injection sites. Of course, this one's a little bit of kryptonite for the Democratic majority. They do not want to discuss this one. They don't want this one coming up because it's really a bad look for them. Voters are seemingly overwhelmingly against it. So no committee hearing date yet.
Can I ask a question, Brandon? Given that she hasn't been in the entire time, is she able to introduce even to committee a bill like that without coming in person to the Capitol?
Actually, she wasn't. I know she's been in person last Monday for the Tabor bill.
Oh, okay. I was mistaken.
She actually voted in favor of it. Elizabeth Epps actually voted in favor of taxpayer protections on that bill. Really, really interesting. But she is a somebody who doesn't vote along with her caucus. She does what she wants. But I saw a picture of her down there that day. So she's been showing up to some committee hearings apparently.
That's good to know. I appreciate that.
A blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again.
With somebody like Elizabeth Epps, who's an abolitionist who supposedly hates the government, it would be wonderful if we could find some common ground from a libertarian perspective. But sometimes these people are actual authoritarians, just kind of spouting anti-authoritarian talking points. So we talked about this one last week. This did pass the first committee hearing last week, Senate Bill 3, to give the Colorado Bureau of Investigation $1.7 million to go after gun owners and gun license dealers. The next committee hearing has not been scheduled yet, so we'll keep people updated on that. But that one will at least get 1 to 2 more committee hearings before it gets passed into law, potentially. This one's being heard okay, so we talked about this last week. It did pass committee. This is the one to allow counties to ban flavored tobacco or tobacco products in general. This is going to the Senate on Tuesday. So the Senate as a whole will be voting on this. So excuse me, it'll be really interesting to see if as a whole caucus, if the Senate Democrats vote against tobacco or not. So it'll be interesting to see. We talked about the reduction of state income tax. This is one we've been watching for a while. It's going to be heard on Monday, the 12th. Stephanie Luck, another Liberty leader down there, a bill to publish bill drafts online before session, increasing government access to government, or citizen access to government, excuse me. That's still scheduled for the February 22nd. We'll talk about that once we get closer. A very controversial bill to triple, if I'm not mistaken, more than triple the property tax burden on commercial property owners like Airbnb owners. This is the lodging property tax treatment. This bill is going to get a lot of attention. It already has, but they're going to hear that on February 20th. So we'll talk about that next week. Everybody's favorite bill of the year, the pet rat registration system, where you'd have to pay $8.50 every year to register your animal and get them with a caretaker, a caregiver if an emergency occurs. The most ridiculous bill of the year. Unanimously killed in committee last week, 12-0. Not a single person voted for this bill in committee because it was so stupid, so ridiculous. The negative headlines were definitely causing some flack for Representative English and her colleagues. So that bill was killed last week. So there we go. No committee hearing date scheduled for the second committee hearing on the towing carrier regulation, House Bill 1051. Keep an eye on that one. And there we go. That's what we got for the week. Anything else? We can open up the floor if anybody else wants to talk. I did want to bring up what Bennett had mentioned very much at the very, very beginning. The Child Sexual Abuse Accountability Amendment. I was very interested in this. Looks like that's going to be Monday, tomorrow. The Senate floor is going to be voting on this one. But apparently, Bennett, if you'd like to talk about it, if you know anything about it, I'd be happy to let you speak on this one if you'd like.
Well, it's definitely a good-hearted attempt. And it looks to me that because it actually deals with two different facets of the issue, apparently this started when a school child was being sexually abused by part of the school staff. Apparently, as it went through the courts, they decided that the school staff had not qualified immunity, but they couldn't be punished because they were part of the government. And so to change that, they have to put in a measure to make an ex post facto change to the law so that this has gone beyond the statute of limitations because the kid wasn't old enough to actually file a civil suit until the statute of limitations had lapsed. And the second is this issue about government immunity, simply because the perpetrator happened to be on the payroll getting money from the government treasury. And I think there's a good chance this amendment proposal is going to run into the single subject rule and get shot down that way.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. We'll see if there's any challenges to it. But yeah, it seems to, it's going to be hard for any opposition, I think, to mount against anybody who thinks we should waive statute of limitations on somebody who was sexually abused as a child. So I could see this one somehow getting passed, but we'll see. So thanks for bringing this up. Very interesting issue. Of course, there's some talk about this being used against the churches, but hey, if there's somebody who did abuse a child and it can be proven in court, they should definitely face the full force of the law, right? So hard to argue there. So thank you, Bennett. Anybody else? Anything else that anybody would like to talk about or bring up?
I'm all good. Appreciate you hosting this as always. For the people that choose to watch it, it's the best resource to know what's going on in the Capitol each week. Happy to participate.
Yes, I think it's really from my understanding, people have commented to me that I work with as chairwoman from outside the party. Oh, you guys are really attending the legislative session this year. Yes, we are. So thank you, Brendan, for always putting this together and helping keep Colorado very free.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, we just encourage individuals to show up, get involved. We need more citizen engagement, more citizen involvement with the government. You should know who your elected representatives are. You should be in communication with them. If you want to fight for liberty, that's one of the most easy ways to do it. It's very accessible here in Colorado. So hope people join us, share this with anybody else out there. We'll see you again every Sunday night from 7:30 p.m. till 9 p.m. on our live stream. You can join on the Free State Colorado YouTube channel. Type in the comments if you got any information there. We're happy to discuss it. Check out freestatecolorado.com/testify to learn a kind of in-depth guide on testifying at the state legislature. And of course, there's some great organizations out there that do track legislation as well for people interested. But nonetheless, appreciate everybody. Hope to see you soon. Hope to see you down at the Capitol. Let's make our voices heard and stand up for liberty. Thank you.